This is Support is Sexy, episode 157, with Benita Johnson, Sommelier and founder of the Vine Wine Club. Welcome to Support is Sexy. I'm your host, Elayne Fluker, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Chic Rebellion Media. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I interview inspiring women entrepreneurs who share their wins and their lessons to help you take your business and your life to the next level and create something sexy. Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Support is Sexy. I'm so excited to have you here because it just would not be the same without you. So today we are welcoming Benita Johnson, and Benita is the founder of the Vine Wine Club, and her website is thevinewineclub.com, which is where her retail shop resides. And in this episode, first, let me start off admitting I did grill Benita about how to choose the perfect wine. It was selfish. It's something that I personally struggle with whenever I go out for a wine. I always drink a Riesling. I want it sweet. Sometimes it's not sweet. Sometimes they bring dry. But when is the next time that I'm going to be able to talk to an actual sommelier? I had to ask her, and she gives actually great advice for me, but great advice for you too on how to choose a wine, how to develop your palate, all of these things around wine because of her profession in owning a wine shop. Right now it's online, but she talks to us in this episode about her journey first in becoming an entrepreneur and then tapping into something she was passionate about, which is wine, and then opening brick and mortar wine shops, the journey through that, and then the moment when she decided to close those shops. So I love that Benita shares with us these different stages of her journey as an entrepreneur and of her businesses and how to reinvent your business when you get to a certain stage in the journey where things may not be the same as they were just a few years ago. And we all know about that, how times are changing so fast. So with all of that, thank you, Benita, for indulging me with our wine conversation. I think it was very enlightening for me, and I know it will be for all of you too. So on this episode, what you'll learn from Benita also is how to know when it's time to make the leap into entrepreneurship. Again, how to choose the perfect wine and develop your palate. Also, tips on negotiating your commercial real estate lease. Benita talks about some insight that she had actually from going to school about what kind of clauses and things to get in her lease. So make sure you pay attention to that. Also, how to know when it's time to walk away from a deal or business venture. We mentioned reinventing your business, something that Benita talks about. The importance of paying attention to the things people keep asking you about when you're creating your new venture. I would say your new venture or when you're going through a reinvention. A lot of times we get caught up in the thing that we've been doing for however many years, and then we try to think about what we want to do next, and we feel sort of stuck. So Benita talks about taking that pause and really taking inventory of the comments or the questions and things that people kept asking her about, which led her to her next version of her business. Also, why you have to decide every single day to be an entrepreneur. Don't we all know that? And then how to get through the dry seasons in your business. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Lots of fun, great information. So without further ado, Benita Johnson. So Benita, thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Support is Sexy. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. So first question, when did you first fall in love with entrepreneurship?
Wow. I guess I was blessed to be born into it. My father had his own construction company when I was growing up, and I was very close to an aunt who had her own hair salon. So I fell in love with, everybody thinks sometimes having your own business is glamorous and, so you own this, so you must be making a lot of money. But what I saw was the freedom, the freedom of time. Even though you work a lot, it's still your time and you can kind of manage it how you want to. So that's what I fell in love with. So when I was a child, I would say.
Now, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I'm still a homegirl. I grew up here. I left just to go to college, and when I was married, we went to New Jersey for a very short time, but I landed right back home.
You're back in Richmond. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say a young Benita was like?
Wow, very studious. You have those kids who could barely open the book, but they just had it. So that was me. I loved people. I grew up in the house with just me and my father, so I wasn't around a lot of people all the time, but I just loved people. I loved family, had a lot of friends. So very friendly, outgoing, but very studious.
Do you think that's what drew you back to Richmond? Do you still have a lot of family or friends there?
I do. And having children, I think, I was blessed to, my grandparents, basically, I was an adult, when I lost my grandparents. And so I wanted my children to have that experience, grow up around grandparents, lots of aunts, just lots of love. And so that is probably what kept me in Richmond.
Mm-hmm. Who were some of your greatest influences growing up?
I mentioned my aunt, because she was just super cool. She's my dad's youngest sister. And so she had her own business, and she always had like a sports car. So, I wanted to be like her in a way. She always dressed nice. And then, I always liked people who were overcomers. I remember when I was a little girl, my father used to tell me I was obsessed with, of all people, so get this, brace yourself, I was obsessed with Helen Keller. But I just thought with all of, her handicaps, of all the things she couldn't do, she still was able to do so much. So I would always, find books and read, I would go to the encyclopedia. This was pre-Google.
Right.
So I would go to the encyclopedia and just find stuff about Helen Keller.
Do you remember how you first heard about Helen Keller?
Probably having to do a book report or something, and back then, wasn't a whole lot of, as I mentioned, this is way before internet.
Right.
So you had very few books on African Americans. You can name the 3 or 5, on one hand that you had books about in your school library back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, teachers would pick somebody for you. Everybody couldn't do Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
So, I think a teacher shared Helen Keller's story with me, and I just felt like, if she could do it, and she couldn't see and she couldn't speak, what's holding me back?
Right. Do you feel like that's something that you continue to adopt just in your own life, even if not related directly to Helen Keller, but just this idea of I can do it?
Yeah, and I'm always looking for, instead of accepting the no, I can't, I kind of look on the other side, how can I do it? Mm-hmm. How can I overcome these hurdles and these barriers?
Excellent. Now, when you went away to school, where did you say you went?
I went to the University of Virginia. So not far, about 70 miles from home.
Okay, so not out of state, you're still near home. When you went away to school, did you have any idea at that point what kind of career path you wanted to follow, or you thought you wanted to follow at that time? Yeah,
I studied accounting. And the reason that I did, as I mentioned, my dad had his business, and he would do his own bookkeeping. And so just with me being in the house with him, I wanted to help. I was one of those curious children. He's like, oh, let me, teach me, show me how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so when my father when I was in 9th grade, I was about 14, my father had a brain aneurysm. And so he was unable to handle payroll and the taxes and stuff for his business, but I knew how to do it. Mm. And so I would handle those things for my dad while he was recovering. And then, beyond that, I took accounting classes in school, and I used to compete in the FBLA competitions. And so, accounting was something I knew how to do. I thought I knew at that point. So I studied. I wanted, to be an accountant. And I was for about 13 years. And, then I realized, what? I'd rather be around people. Mm-hmm. And, an accountant is you in a cubicle a lot of times with a computer, and that's it.
So what did you do once you made that decision, or that came to that realization that I want to be around people? What was your first step in making that transition?
I just quit. And
you did?
And I just quit. And I know that sounds, just real cut and dry, but basically it was a day when I was frustrated at work. I was a mother of 3 at this point. And motherhood always came first. Once I became a mother, that's what I wanted to do. And so I was a mother, and I just wanted to be available to my family. If the kids had a field trip, I wanted to go on a field trip. I didn't want to worry about, do I have vacation time? And so this particular day I was frustrated, and I called my husband, and I said, I'm quitting today. And he was like, what? And he knew it was nothing, preventing me from quitting. And I said, yep, today's going to be my last day. And he said, well, can you just wait 90 days? And I said, okay. I was like, well, I won't be here on day 91. And so, at that time, I had to come up with what I'm going to do, because I knew I was no longer going to be an accountant.
So did you wait the 90 days?
On day 89, I was out.
Day 89. Not a day longer.
No.
Oh my goodness. So then what were those 90 days like? What was the planning or the planning process?
Well, we that day, we went home, we started right then, and kind of thought about what I liked to do. And I liked wine. And so where we lived was a very rural area. We had bought some land. He had moved me all the way out to the country, girl. Mm-hmm. So we bought this land. And so it was very rural. So everything we did for fun, we had to drive at least 25 miles in any direction.
What part of this was still in Virginia?
Yeah. So this was a little town called Providence Forge.
Okay.
And so we about east of Richmond, about 25 miles. So I wanted to we used to always go and do wine tasting. So we decided that we were going to open a beer and wine shop. So immediately we started looking for storefronts. And so I found two that I really liked. And my ex-husband, well, he's my ex-husband now, but he said, let's just take both of them. And so November of 2005, I opened one store. And February 2006, I opened the second store.
Wow. So you guys knew, or you knew, I should say, that when you mentioned wanting to be around people, when you left the accounting job, it wasn't like, I'm going to find another position that allows me to be around people. Did you know at that point, I want to be an entrepreneur? And then
I knew. Mm-hmm. I knew because, at the same time, I want to be around people, but I want to be the master of my own time.
Right.
I wanted to be an active mother. When the kids were homesick, I didn't want to have to ask one of our parents to keep them. I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was it about wine? What do you love? I mean, what's not to love about wine? But sounds like a silly question. But what do you love about wine, or why was that the thing? Because it seems like such a big jump, but maybe it wasn't.
Well, I knew I liked retail because back in the day when I would. Like when I just had one child, sometimes I would work a part-time job, and I always liked working in the store, because folks come in there with their individual needs and you help them. And so I liked that. And so, and then it was different experiences every day. I found that out about myself. I like change. So so why wine? Wine was one of those things that was like mysterious to me. You start out drinking a certain type of wine, and then if you're bold enough, you try something different. And it was just amazing to me. You had all of these different varietals, and then even if you drink 3 of the same varietals, if they're from 3 different places, it may taste different. So I liked that experience. So I liked learning. And what I found in my study, and I'm using the term study loosely, okay? Study just meant going from store to store, tasting different things, all right? So, in my study, I was noticing that, a lot of the folks who educated about wine, they kind of, came off, and I don't want to call them arrogant, they just kind of came off a little bit arrogant. So, I didn't want that, I didn't like that. So I knew then I wanted to learn about wine, and I want to share what I know to people like me in a far less intimidating manner.
Mm-hmm. And did you start doing that right away with the shops, or were the retail shops mainly just for people to come in, buy a bottle, and go about their way?
The retail shops became a social hangout. It was a way, it was almost like community. Because, when you came in, I treated you like home. I tried to identify something about you so I could remember, because I may not remember your name. But if you told me that your cat was sick. I'm going to remember that you had a cat. So I would engage people, and of course we have tastings on the weekends, and folks would come in, and they intended to come and grab a bottle and leave, but an hour and a half later, you're still in there talking to me.
Right. And was the wine shop located in an area where there wasn't much else like it around?
Yeah, and the first one we opened, when we first opened that wine shop, and these were very nice. We went all out and shelving and everything. People were like, "You crazy for putting that over here," But it was the area where I grew up in that area, so I knew a lot of the people. Their families still lived there, so the people that I knew and my contemporaries, they would come back if they didn't still live in the area. So I knew that, okay, we wanted something nice too in this area growing up. We didn't want to always have to go to the West End or the North Side for the nice stores. So I bought the nice store to the East End where I grew up.
Excellent. Now, another thing that you did too, and I believe this was years later, was become a sommelier, right?
I did. So I opened the stores, the first store November 2005. I became a sommelier in January 2007.
Okay, so now for those of us who saw the movie Somm, which I'm sure you saw,
I did.
We know that it seems to be not a very easy task, but what was it about becoming a sommelier that you felt like, I want to do this, this is necessary for me? Because you already had the wine shop at that point, could be considered a quote unquote expert, but why did you want to take that extra step?
I wanted to learn more, number one, and then on the other hand, you have some people who I needed to have that credential for them to trust me. It's not like I didn't necessarily need it. I don't need titles, but sometimes other people need titles to certify that I know what I'm talking about.
And what was that process like? Well, first tell people, for those listening who don't know, what a sommelier does or is, and then what that process was like for you.
Okay, well, in simple terms, it's basically a wine expert. Wine and spirits, some cigars, it's not only wine. It's kind of like this whole beverage service. And so the process, was a lot of study, very intense class. I went through the Court of Master Sommeliers. So very intense classroom training, led by folks who, wearing ascots and suits, right? And, so they're teaching us about the geography. They're teaching us about, various varietals, and we're tasting and, we're trying to discern all these various flavors that they're talking about, and then understand why the wine tastes like this, understanding the difference between types of oak and what different types of oak impart to the wine. And then at the end of the day, there's and I said the end of the day, meaning the end of the class, you have, you go through a blind tasting exercise to try to identify what this wine is, down to not just varietal, but what part of the world this particular wine was grown in, and also what vintage. And then, so it's a process. You got to really love wine to want to put yourself through that.
How long was the process overall?
Well, the class, you don't have to take the class. I took the class. A lot of people, I saw an article in the Washington Post not too long ago. Some folks were just self-studying, and they have different study groups. Now, because I worked in the store 7 days a week, all day, that was a lot of my study.
Right.
I tasted, and this is going to sound worse than it truly is, but I tasted every wine that came in my shop because I needed to know what it tastes like, and to be able to sell it to you. So part of what made my shop unique, I learned your palate. And so when I would, my vendors would come in to sell wine to me, I'm thinking I have a customer in mind. So next time you come in my store, I'm like, you know what? I got this just for you. And so, going back to how long did the process take? I started self-studying probably 6 months out before I actually went to the class. And the class that I chose was more like what those call like those executive MBAs,
Okay.
where you like cram it in. So I did a 3-day class, and you took the exam at the end of day 3.
Wow. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily pass those exams, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of people were disappointed, and basically what they did after we took the exam, they may have kicked us out maybe 2-3 hours or so, long enough for you to walk around. I took it down in Charlotte, so long enough for you to walk around Charlotte, get something to eat, sweat it out a little, and then they came back and they called your name individually if you passed.
And if you didn't,
Oh well.
oh well. Oh my goodness. So now, I have to ask you, what is your favorite wine?
I drink Zinfandels probably more than I drink anything else. Okay. Because I like, a lot of people stay away from reds in the summer, but I think Zinfandels are so delicious with things that come off the grill. Like I like black bean burgers and turkey burgers, and I like I like ribs, I like salmon, and I like these things. I like to spend a lot of time outside grilling, and I think Zinfandel is one of the best wines. It's nice and fruit forward, but it still has that good structure that goes well with food.
Okay, so now I have a selfish question. What is your favorite Riesling? Favorite brand, I should say.
A Riesling.
Because that's my favorite wine, I think.
Okay, I like and it's interesting about Rieslings, and that was like my second. I call it my first introduction to real wine, because I used to drink white Zinfandel. We all did. Sutter Home, Behringer. So then, like, my first step into real wine was Riesling, and so the Riesling that the wine steward recommended was one from Washington. And so then I'm a big girl, right? So I'm going to go to the grocery store and I'm going to buy some Riesling myself. And so I bought one from California and it tasted totally different. And so Rieslings are one of those varietals that can taste vastly different, depending on where it's from, how long it was harvested. They have probably 8 or 9 levels of sweetness for Riesling. So you gotta know what you like.
Right.
So
and I like sweet, and sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But I haven't found a go-to brand or bottle yet.
All right. So I like mine like more semi-dry, I think. Some kind of medium. So I like the ones from New York, because New York is kind of cool. The growing regions are cooler than California. And so with those, you're still going to get some fruit, but you're going to get good acid. And so it's not going to be, you're going to have fruit, but it's not going to be as sweet. So I like Lamoureux Landing is one that I like a lot from New York. What I would suggest for you, since you like a sweeter style, do you like, have you had Dr. L?
No.
Okay, try Dr. L.
Dr. ALE?
L, letter L.
Oh,
it's
Dr.
like Dr.
L.
Lucen.
Okay, Dr.
So
L.
try that. I think you'll love it.
All right, everyone. So the next podcast episode, I might have a glass of Dr. L nearby.
Yes.
Do you sell that on your site?
I don't sell Dr. L. And, the ones that I sell, are more from family operated vineyards, more limited production. And I do that because, as an entrepreneur, of course, I respect the small family business.
Right.
And also, those guys don't, they're not producing as much wine. So you're not going to find it in like the big box stores.
So more like a boutique almost.
Yes. They may only produce maybe 4,000 cases a year. So they can't afford, to put it in like here we have Total Wine and the grocery store sell wine. So they can't afford to do that because basically one chain can wipe them out.
Right. I see. So I will ask you, what kind of tips do you have for the average person on how to find the perfect wine? And I ask, for those of us listening who aren't drinkers, it's fine. But sometimes you go out, you might want to have a glass, or you're at a business meeting or whatever it is. How do we choose the perfect wine if we're not certainly not sommeliers, but in general, if we don't either drink a lot or don't have a lot of experience with choosing a wine?
If you're at a restaurant, I tell people this all the time. Do not be afraid to ask your server. If the server doesn't know, ask for the wine steward. It's somebody in that restaurant that should be able to help you with your selection. In most cases, they'll pour a little bit, for you, so you can taste it first before, you commit to purchasing a glass, and, by all means, before you commit to purchasing a bottle. Do a lot of wine tasting. When you go to wine shops, there's a lot, even around here, and I'm sure where you are as well, the grocery stores even do wine tasting. Do sampling so you can, start to develop a palate and know at least one or two things that you like. And, if you haven't done those things, I tend to suggest to folks to stay with the younger wines, because usually the younger wines are going to be a little less dry, a little more fruity. So like, what year is this? 17. If you're new to wine, I wouldn't be drinking much older than a 15 at this point.
The 2015.
Yes.
Okay. Very interesting. And with developing our palate, is it just a matter of, as you said, learning what you like? For example, I say, I know I like sweet, but I might not know what kind of wine, or, other than Riesling, a sweet Riesling. But if I could at least tell a server, if I were in a restaurant or at a bar, this is what I'm looking for, and then they should be able to suggest something.
They should absolutely be able to suggest something. Yeah, they should. And, a lot of times you have to tell them, some folks, they get a little bit snooty with the wine knowledge, right? So, their sweet may be different from your sweet. And don't be afraid to say, nope, I don't like this. Take it back. Sometimes people feel like they're stuck with it. You're not stuck with it.
Right. With everything in life, you're not stuck with it.
That's right. Move on.
Move on. So for you then, after having the shops, do you still have the brick and mortar shops now?
I do not have the brick and mortars, but I have a cute little space, so I sell wine online and I have a wine club. So I have a real cute little space in downtown Richmond in the art district where I do wine education. So I teach a couple classes a month. And, folks come, they get to taste wine. We kind of theme them. Like next week, I have a wine and chocolate class since we're coming up on Valentine's Day. So, so folks can, just experience some things and get educated on, on how to read a label and discern what's inside of that bottle.
And with the online portion of the business, the Vine Wine Club, right? Yes. The vinewineclub.com. I wanted to make sure I got it right there. So you started that in 2014, right?
Yes.
What was the motivation, I should say, to move from having the brick and mortar space to selling the wine online? From what I understand, you needed a little bit of a nudge to finally do that, right?
Yeah, I had to be pushed. I was bullied, okay?
I said a nudge, but yeah.
So the landscape changed in Richmond in terms of the grocery landscape. So back in the day and for years, Richmond had been dominated by an awesome family-owned grocery chain. And that chain did not sell wine or beer. So almost every shopping center where you found one of those grocery stores, you found a wine and beer shop. So it made it real easy for us to do business during their reign. So in 2009, they decided to sell. And so anybody who, I had an MBA at that point, so I knew a little bit about business. So, I'm like, okay, what's the chance of another grocery store coming in here that I won't have to compete with? Slim to none, right? So I was like, let me get out of this brick and mortar. The rents were not cheap. I think I was paying $3,000 or better a month per store for rent. So it's like, let me get out of this before I lose everything I own and lose all of these profits that I've made. And so in my leases, another thing I learned getting my MBA was to have that anchor clause. So I had the anchor store clause. Once the anchor store changed, I had the option to break my lease. And so I exercised options on both my leases once the anchor stores changed. So I was able to walk away.
What's the anchor store? Sorry to interrupt.
The anchor store is like the draw in the mall. So like say, if you got a mall and Bloomingdale's is the big store in the mall, that's an anchor.
Okay.
So if the anchor leaves, it's going to change the makeup of the customer base because all those Bloomingdale shoppers aren't coming to that mall anymore.
And that's something that you request when you're signing your lease.
Yeah, if you're doing a commercial lease, especially in a shopping center, definitely you should have one of those clauses.
Very good advice. So once that changed, you were able to say with both of your locations, I want to get out of this because that has changed now.
Yeah, because both of my leases, I had 90-day anchor store clauses. So, once the anchor store closed or left or changed, I had 90 days to be able to break my lease. And if I had gone to day 91, I'm stuck for the duration of my lease.
Now, was that transition, or not even the transition, was that decision difficult for you? Because I know you loved having those locations.
I did, but it wasn't difficult because although I loved it, I had to do what was best for my family, was definitely best for the bank account. And, I knew at that point as well, business was transitioning, but I was going through some personal transition. And, I knew I was about to become a single mom. So, I had to protect what little assets, I had at that point.
Now, without diving too much into your personal business, of course, whatever you're comfortable sharing, did having the businesses affect your marriage at all, or was it other things?
No, it did affect my marriage because, as I mentioned to you, naturally I'm very outgoing and everybody can't handle that. And, with folks coming in the store, in and out, all the time, men come. I sold as much beer as I sold wine.
Right.
So I was around a lot of people. And it made it a little bit hard, explaining, well, who is that you hugging? Like I said, one of the stores was in the area where I grew up, where I went to high school. So a lot of folks would come in that I knew. And so, yeah, it was a bit of a strain.
So when you were making this transition then, both personally, you also were doing it professionally of moving from the brick and mortar to the online space.
Yeah, well, I took a break. It was 5 years in between closing the brick and mortar and opening the online store. And the reason, so during that time, I had to regroup and, figure out where I'm going to live. And, my daughter was graduating, had to get her in college. So, there were some things going on in between that I had to deal with. And so I ended up, even when I closed the store, I loved wine and had the credentials, but I really wasn't thinking that I would stay in wine. That wasn't necessarily a goal. What I wanted to do was to, at the time, I wanted to help women because I felt like, all right, I'm taking these bumps and bruises, dealing with the business change, dealing with my marital status change. I wanted to be able to help women to figure out what it is they want to do, what you love, and help them to be able to turn that into their living because I had done that. I had walked away from a lucrative career in accounting to, hardly even taking a paycheck having these two stores. So
you have been through that part of the journey.
So I wanted to help other women get through that.
So then what was the point where you decided, okay, this is the move that I need to make? And you went forward with the online store, which also offers a lot more like courses and those kinds of things that you still do now.
Because people wouldn't leave me alone.
Oh, that's what they say. Look around at right? When you're trying to figure it out, what are people asking you for?
Oh, goodness. I would go to festivals and events in Richmond and folks would say, hey, wine lady. And, with these camera phones, folks would take pictures of wine labels in the store and text it to me and say, is this good? And so I could never get away from it. And so I met a really cool friend in 2011. And he recognized me. He had come in my store before and he wrote on his whiteboard. We both have these whiteboards that, we write business stuff or dreams or whatever. He put on his whiteboard a wine shop. And I said, gee, I'm not doing that anymore. And he just kept it up there. So then I think it was maybe in 13, he paid somebody to do a business plan for an online wine shop. And I kept saying, I'm not doing it. And so finally in 14, he said, well, let's have a meeting. And so we had this meeting, and he and I formed the business. He's my business partner, George. We formed this business, and we started doing this online, and I love it.
You love
I
it. I was
love
going to say, how has it changed your business?
It's been real good. It still allowed me, that part of me that wanted to do something for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Because we opened August 2014. I think it was August. Yeah, August 2014. We opened. And I built my first little raggedy website. Or I don't know nothing about building websites, but I had more time than I had money. Okay,
Right.
so I said I'm gonna figure it out. So I built this website, and we launched. And at the same time, I had a blog talk radio show. And so I was had Marcus Johnson on my show around November of that year, and he was he has a wine brand called Flow. And so he was, marketing and pushing his own brand. And it took me right back to when I had the brick and mortars where I had met a couple of African American winemakers or winery owners.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody told me about their wines. And so I was frustrated. It was like, you have to go through a distributor where I live. So the distributor has a responsibility and a job to be able to tell me about those wines. And nobody said anything. And so when Marcus said he was out there hustling his own wines, I made the decision at that point that I wanted to be the champion for African American winemakers. Now, it's not that I only sell those, but I wanted to do something to put them in a spotlight and let people who don't know that these folks existed, like I didn't before 2006, for folks that don't know that these wineries exist or these winemakers are out there, I wanted to do some type of event to spotlight their successes and their struggles, and share their wine with people just like me, people in my area, and make these folks the ambassadors of the wine.
And that event that you do now is called the exclusive Blacklist, right?
Yes, that's the exclusive Blacklist. So this year we're about to do the 3rd annual.
Mm-hmm. And what does the event entail? What is it like?
Oh, wow. It's a lot. It's great energy, first of all. We get African American winemakers, or I get access to all of the wines from African Americans that are available to me in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Okay. And so we have all these wines out there. We have phenomenal heavy hors d'oeuvres. So folks have dinner. We have live jazz. So people can taste the wines, you eat, you meet the winemakers if they are able to come to Richmond during those weekends. And you choose your People's Choice. So we have a little People's Choice Award ceremony. It's just great energy. We have a wonderful time.
And where is the event? Is it held in Richmond also?
It is in Richmond. This year we are holding the event at our newly renovated Black History Museum and Cultural Center.
Very nice. So who are the people that will be there? Will be all the winemakers, but are they receiving awards?
Well, what we do when folks come in, when our guests come, we give them a ballot. And so they go and they taste all the wine. And at the end of the evening, they submit their ballot and we run it back real quick and get them counted. And we present the award at the end of the evening. So last year, Miss Gwen Hurt, she has a wine brand called Shoe Crazy. So Gwen and her daughter, Brittany, they operate their company and they won. They have a wine called Sweet Harmony. So if you like sweet wine, you love Sweet Harmony. So Sweet Harmony was the favorite. And I just want to put this out there because Gwen was talking mad trash today. When I told her I was going to pick up the trophy for this year, she told me to go ahead and put her name on it because she knows she will win again.
All right, Miss Gwen. There you go. That's right. Be confident. I love it. That sounds fun. So for people to find out more information about the event, where should they go? I'll have links to everything, of course, on your show notes page, but just in case anyone's listening and in the area.
Sure. They should go to the website, www.thevinewineclub.com, and they'll see information there about the event, and then more detailed stuff on the About page. We have About, the exclusive Blacklist page.
Excellent. Fantastic. So what would you say, Benita, entrepreneurship has taught you about yourself as a woman?
It has taught me that, it's taught me a lot. Number one, that I can make it. Like some days this is a very true story. Like working on this blacklist, like right now, I was looking at my bank account, and I do some consulting work, and pretty much I get, at the beginning of the month is when folks pay their invoices. Okay, so this month I was looking at my bank balance, and I had this is my checking account that my kids eat from, and I have teenage boys in my house, so if you know anything about how teenage boys eat, it's expensive. So I had maybe $300 in my account, and I just kind of chuckled because I was like, "Dang, girl, you got to make it to the end of the month." But I got some other funds, but I'm talking about in my little operating account.
Right.
But then I said, you know what, Benita, you have done it with less, and so what I've learned is, I grew up, having plenty. When I was married, he made a lot of money, so I never even had to look at the bank account. I knew I could swipe the card and it was not going to be denied. But it has taught me that this money that I've invested in myself is worth every penny for the cost of my freedom.
And I think, thank you for mentioning too, just that, as you talked about earlier on in the conversation, just when you left your job, you had that sort of, in some ways, a safety net there because you were married at the time, your husband made the money. But then now, speaking of, the current day, the fact that though it sounds like you wouldn't trade it in, even though at this point you're looking at $300 till the end of the month.
Yeah, I have had plenty of opportunities to go to work. I'm living in my home city where I know a whole lot of folks, a lot of people with businesses. I could have gotten a job if that's what I wanted to do. But, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And, if any entrepreneur can tell you, sometimes it's feast, sometimes it's famine.
Yes, ma'am.
And I've been there. But I know that, some material things. When I left my job, I had a Mercedes. So I didn't have to worry about a mortgage and stuff like that because my husband was going to pay for that. But the only thing that I was paying for out of my paycheck was my car note. So I sacrificed it. I let the car go back because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So, I picked up the keys to one of them other vehicles that was sitting in the yard all day long, while he driving one thing, I'm driving something. There was two more things sitting at home.
Wow.
So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick up the keys and drive something else.
Right. Do you think like the decision to, as you mentioned, let things go, I've been there, or not take the job that could easily be there, or even if not easily, but that you could make it happen. Do you think that's a decision that as an entrepreneur you have to make every single day?
You have to make that every single day.
Yeah.
Because you wake up in the morning and, everybody who works for themselves, you've experienced this. You don't know when that next invoice is going to be paid. You're always looking for that next client. Even in the wine store, I remember the first day I opened that store, I'm thinking the floodgates, it's going to be tons of people. That first day, I think we made $8.
Oh, wow.
Somebody came, and it was probably somebody who just felt sorry for me and my friend. They came and bought a couple beers. We made no money. And so I'm like, what? I can't believe, who doesn't drink wine every day? I do. That's what people do, right? So, nobody was in there. And so it took me, we opened on a Tuesday. Friday was like mad crazy, the weekend. So, and so it took a minute, for me to get adjusted that every day is not going to be a sunny day,
Right.
But we need the rain too.
That's right. And then how to, and after I think, at least in my experience, and let me know what you think, for all the entrepreneurs out there listening that might be going through a little bit of a dry season, once you sort of get through a year or two of your business, you start to recognize the season. Every business or industry is different. So, if you're in fashion, your season might be bigger in the fall and the spring or whatever kind of industry, but you start to get to know, and then you can prepare for those down seasons.
That's absolutely correct. And we have to continually reinvent ourselves and think of new methods to make it work. We can't sell anything the same way you were able to sell it 10 years ago.
Right.
So we have to stay current. And sometimes, we fall into our little rut and, we want to keep doing it the same way. But, we're just hurting ourselves when we do that.
And have you found that in your case of doing things a new way, that it has helped you continue to not only keep the business going, but expand it into other spaces maybe you weren't thinking about when you had the brick and mortar shop?
Absolutely. It's some things I used to feel like I could do everything myself, but we can't run our businesses effectively if we're not focused on the meat and potatoes of the business. So, for example, I have to pay somebody else to do my social media. I don't get paid for social media. It's an indirect thing. It builds exposure and it gets you to my website. But I have to pay somebody else to do that because that takes so much time out of, my day when I can be focused on selling wine or teaching folks about wine. I have to pay somebody to do public relations for me because if I'm out here, chasing down PR opportunities, it's going to take away from what I need to do. And so, and I understand money, we don't all have a whole lot of it to spend on some things. But, when I decided that I'm going to invest this money in myself, I noticed immediately, putting that time that I was spending on these other things, putting that time into my business, it hasn't cost me anything.
Because you're getting sort of return on it in other ways.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, what does your support network look like?
Well, I have a great support system in I'm surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs, so that helps, because we know each other's struggles. And so, we don't when one person is down, we can kind of pick, the other folks can pick that person up or kind of give them ideas or point them to a direction, introduce them to someone. I'm involved with a couple of women networking groups. And one of them is great. The other one, I'm still giving it a chance, but these groups are, they're very active groups. And one of them, the one that I really love, they do they're aggressive in terms of helping another person. So basically, you go in there and you say what you want and people just start pointing, to you, handing you a phone number of somebody, directly that may need your service. And so it's very reciprocal because I do the exact same thing. When I can support businesses within that network, I do it, without hesitation. I don't even think about that.
Right. And sometimes we don't remember that those things are part of your support network too. Being in a group like that, whether it's on Facebook or somewhere else, where you can ask a question and get the response. It doesn't have to be someone who's your best friend, right?
That's true. And then my family is a big network. Being a single mother of 3, the kids are active and they have places to go and I'm trying to do my thing. So my family has been a tremendous help in helping me. As a matter of fact, while I'm talking to you, my dad had to take my one of my sons has choir practice, so he has to do that. So I do have a tremendous amount of help, and I couldn't do it without him.
Now, in closing, if you think over your life and career, and you had the chance to thank only one person whose support was critical to you personally or professionally, who would that be, and what would you say? This is gonna sound real crazy, but I would thank my ex-husband. And I would tell you why. Although, I was able to quit my job because I didn't have to worry about where I lived. But what he did was he didn't help in any other way. And so it motivated me that I was going to do this. I'm going to make this work by myself. Without him, I didn't have any other money other than what I could make out of these stores. He wasn't going to help in that way. The only thing he didn't do was put me out the house. So I want to thank him because, he told me one time, after we broke up, if I had worked this hard when we were together, he would have stayed. Oh my goodness.
And I chuckled, because I worked this hard because I have to. I worked this hard for my kids and, for my sanity. So I'm grateful to him for being who he was.
Being who he was. There you go. So tell us, Benita, how can we support you? Tell us, as I said, I'll have links to everything, but just so people can hear your website again, any social media or anything you want us to follow.
Oh, yes, please. So I'm on Facebook and Twitter as the Vine Wine Club. Instagram, just drop the. It's just Vine Wine Club. Let's see. Please go to my website. We're going to do so many more things. Of course, we have the Blacklist next weekend. We have Cuisine Noir's Behind the Business Conference next weekend. But even beyond the Blacklist, we're going to be doing so many exciting things. So stay tuned to the website. Stay tuned to the Twitter, the Twitter, right? Stay tuned to Twitter. And just, we just got a lot of stuff coming up. So we're real excited about 2017.
Now, you mentioned the Blacklist, but you mentioned another event that you have. I didn't hear about that one, the cuisine.
Oh, all right. So I know we're about to wrap up, but this year we expanded the exclusive Blacklist to a weekend. Before it was just a Friday event that I described.
Oh.
So we're making Richmond a destination. So on Saturday, we're doing a wine pair brunch over at Spoonbread Bistro, which is owned by a very popular African-American chef in the area, Chef Mike Hall. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a wine pair brunch. That afternoon, we're doing Cuisine Noir started a conference called Behind the Business. So we're doing the Behind the Business conference, and my keynote speaker is Chef Rock Harper. He was, I don't know if you watch Hell's Kitchen, but he was season 3 winner. So the conference is geared towards folks who are interested in any aspect of the food and beverage industry. So just, helping you get started, helping you think of creative ways to succeed. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we're going to end our weekend with a jazz concert featuring 3-time Grammy nominated James Saxmo Gates.
Nice. Very nice. So this we can find out all about, I should say, on your website.
You can.
Okay. Excellent. So everyone listening, if you're in the area, make sure you go to supportisexypodcast.com, and I'll have links to everything that Benita mentioned, and you can find everything there. Perfect. Thank you so much, Benita. You've been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a wonderful time.
Yeah, good. Now, before you go, what's a parting piece of advice from you to our listeners about anything?
Never be afraid of failure. There's a lesson when we fail sometimes, so we take that lesson and we build on it.
Excellent. Never be afraid of failure. Benita, thank you. Hold on just a second.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to that interview with Benita Johnson. I hope you enjoyed it. For more information and for links to the resources and the wines that she mentions in this episode, go to supportissexypodcast.com. Again, supportissexypodcast.com. Search Benita, Benita, and you'll see her show notes there. All of the links, all of the resources will be there. Also, if you enjoyed this interview with Benita and the other interviews that we've done with other inspiring women entrepreneurs, please go to supportissexylove.com. That's supportissexylove.com to find out more about the podcast, my journey to launching it, my intention with launching it, which is really being of service to women and letting women know that support is sexy. I'm really passionate about having this mind shift around support so that we all know that we can not only depend on each other, but that it serves us and serves the other people in our lives if we have a community around the things that we're trying to do. Support is sexy. The podcast is just a part of that message. So please go to supportissexylove.com so you can find out more about how you can support the podcast in a lot of different ways. Thank you so much for listening. One of the great ways that you're supporting us. You know that I appreciate you. And now you know what to do. Go out there and create something sexy. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.